Hey guys, what's up? It is Public back with another video on the Shadowlands Alpha Beta. Don't really know what to call it yet. I've been doing a lot of testing on what we currently have available to us, which I believe is the beta build that's coming soon. So by the time you're watching this video, it might already be released as a beta. Just know that things haven't changed. Everything is still the same from when I recorded this. So without further ado, we're going to go over quickly, one, how you acquire the legendaries, how you actually craft them inside of the Torghast chamber, and then I'm going to actually go through in detail like what each shadow legendary does specifically, and kind of showcase them on the target dummies that I have. And then afterwards, we're going to go over some ideas for new legendaries that we have. I feel like we don't have all of them yet. There's still a few missing compared to what other specs and classes have. So just throwing some ideas out there from the community. And then lastly, just going to talk about some problems that we've seen with some of these, and specifically this kind of balance with, you know, only having one legendary that's utility and throughput is kind of weird. So we're going to kind of go over that problem real quick. All right, let's get into it. Okay, guys, before we kind of get into what legendaries we currently have available for us in the alpha, beta, whatever you want to call it, I do quickly want to go over how you actually get them and acquire them. Currently, this system is available inside of a craftable system inside of Torghast, or I guess adjacent to Torghast. So let's go ahead and jump into the Maw zone, which is where Torghast is located, where you access things. So to do this right now in alpha, you do have to do a short little quest line to kind of, one, unlock the Maw itself, and then also get into Torghast and find this, I guess, architect or crafter to help you make these guys. So we're going to showcase that real quick. So this is the Maw zone if you haven't seen it yet. I don't know how much of this will actually stay in the game. A lot of this stuff does feel a little work in progress-y. But after I unlock Torghast, there's a teleport over here that basically shoots me over to this side of the zone where we saw the original entrance. So we'll go ahead and enter Torghast. Go ahead and enter the instance, except that guy. And then basically you walk in here and there's a kind of a secret zone here. So this is the Torghast you might have seen before from alpha footage. You get to walk into some of these halls and there's various different things. But if you turn around and actually go backwards, there is, well, this is the exit door if you wanted to leave Torghast, of course. There's also this extra portal to the Rune Carver's cell. So you can go ahead and activate this guy. And this is the room of the Rune Carver. So this is some entrapped dude that crafts legendaries for us, which is cool. Again, some of this stuff is pretty work in progress-y. This room, though, is awesome. But yeah, so this guy's pretty shackled up. You unshackle one of his arms, and I guess he's able to make you one legendary when you do this. So on alpha, they've given us this guy to basically, you know, attach legendary effects to, and then I've unlocked the legendary powers. No real detail yet about how this gets unlocked or whatever, but that's what that is. So I'll go ahead and buy, let's go ahead and just buy a legendary cape here. Or not a legendary cape, it's just a normal cape. Who knows what we'll actually be able to put this on. I go ahead and craft a legendary here. There is a currency cost to this. No quite detail yet on how to acquire that. And then if I go ahead and drop in one of these items here, you can see the plus button appears here. And I can select a legendary power to put on this piece. So it is kind of interesting that not all effects are available for every slot. So I guess for cloaks right now, the Call to the Void and Painbreaker Psalm legendary effects are the only ones that can go on cloaks. But if I were to say put in a necklace, you can see how there's no powers for necklaces for my given spec, which is interesting. And then if I go to say boots, there's a cauterizing shadow effect. When shadow pain expires on a target, 5 allies within 20 yards of the target are healed for 6% of their max health, which is available to you as a shadow priest, although it doesn't really do damage. So it's a thing, but you know, probably not going to go over it very much other than that. But if we go back to the cloak, we'll kind of showcase this. I really like the Call to the Void one. This is the one that actually brings up tentacles back to the game. So go ahead and select that effect, and you can see now it's kind of locked into that chain. And then you actually get 2 additional slots right now, and the way this is configured at least, you get to kind of choose what stats are here. So you can see it says add secondary, get like a little preview of what this is. Right now I have like these runes of the various stats that I can put in. Don't know how that'll work or how you'll acquire these, but you know, as a Shadow Priest, I love me some haste and crit, so go ahead and select the haste one and select the crit one. So now I have a crit haste cloak. Just note I can't select haste twice or crit twice in this case. So you do have to select one stat in each slot. They can't be duplicates. And then you go ahead and hit create here, and then you just have a little cast to do a little rune carving, and then you get a cloak. So if I exit back out of this, you can see now I have a cloak that has my inflate tendrils on it. So that's kind of how you craft them right now. Again, not sure how much of this will stay, but that's what we have now. Okay, so first things first, we're going to take a look at the, I guess, quote-unquote, Power Infusion Legendary. So if you haven't watched my previous video, know that we did get Power Infusion back into the game as a spell. And you can also, the big change from when we had it back in Legion is that you can now cast it on allies, or I guess other targets in general, I should say. So by baseline, you can only cast it one person, that's it. So I could give it to, say, another priest in my group or a mage or whatever. They get Power Infusion, done. Now, there is a legendary. It's so on this, I put on a shoulder piece. Power Infusion also grants you 100% of its effects when used on an ally. So I'll go ahead and throw this guy on there. This guy's pretty straightforward, right? If I want to give this to someone else in my group, I also get it. It does have some interesting interactions, I will say, with Shadow. I don't know if this will actually be usable for anything, but I'll go ahead and showcase this here. So the interesting part is, currently in the what I have access to as far as alpha, beta, whatever you want to call this, I can actually cast this on my Shadowfiend or Mindbender. So if I go ahead and get into this target dummy and I cast Shadowfiend, right, I can put Power Infusion on my Shadowfiend, right? You can see he's also now glowing, and I also get Power Infusion. He does indeed take effect from that haste that I currently get with Power Infusion, and he gets. It does seem to be double dipping that haste currently. Don't know if that's a bug or if that's actually fully intended, but that is how it's seemingly working right now. Although I'm not quite sure how beneficial it will be. It's called to get to melee faster. You do get some insanity, but Shadowfiend isn't necessarily a great cooldown anyway. So probably best just to give it to someone else in your group. But time will kind of tell on that guy. Now, the kind of problem with this, as far as the idea of oh yeah, I'll give it to a fire mage during his combust window, that'll be really good for him, or some other member of your raid, whatever makes sense. The problem with that is when that other raid member or other party member wants Power Infusion, might not be beneficial for you to use it. So for example, if I'm sitting here, I'm just starting up my rotation, okay, I'm in void form. And then the fire mage whispers me hey, give me Power Infusion. I'm ready for it because I have combust active. I'm like, wait a second, I'm still ramping my void form. I don't want to give Power Infusion to you yet because that means I get it at low stacks, right? As a Shadow Priest, you're going to want it to use it at a bit later in stacks to help push your void form forward, but they want it to line up with their cooldown. So there's kind of a bit of a problem with how this synchronizes with other classes and specs in the game. So I think the idea is interesting that we're not necessarily getting direct benefit from this legendary. The raid team as a whole is. I think this is okay. Obviously, for selfish reasons, it's not super fun or interesting to me, but it does kind of give the raid an option that doesn't fully, make you feel bad about it. Because if I were just to give it to a fire mage without this legendary, I obviously wouldn't get anything from that, but he might benefit greatly, or the warlock, or whoever it is. So it's an interesting idea. Again, I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't really know the use cases because of how the lineups work. My gut reaction is this is probably too weird of a legendary to actually see a use case, or whether I use it on someone, they might not get full benefit because it's not during their cooldowns, but it's during mine, or the vice versa. The Shadow Priest using it wouldn't get full benefit, but the person they're casting it on would. So I don't know. That problem's kind of weird. I don't really even know how they would fix that. So yeah, that's the first legendary we've got so far. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, guys. So the next one we're going to take a look at is this helm that I have here. This is kind of noted the Shadowfiend Legendary, Mindbender Legendary, whatever you want to say. So go ahead and equip this guy real quick. So this guy empowers your Shadowfiend and Mindbender with a reduced cooldown, and then also extra damage as a Shadow Flame component. So right now on Alpha, when I'm testing, Shadowfiend goes down to a 1.8 minute cooldown, and then if we real quick, we go ahead and talent into Mindbender, it is a 36-second cooldown, which is a pretty huge reduction. And just for comparison, right, if I take this off, baseline Mindbender is a minute, and of course Shadowfiend is a 3-minute cooldown. So it definitely gives you a significant reduction right there off the bat in the cooldown reduction. And then you get some extra damage off the top. Right now it's a 20% additional Shadow Flame modifier. What I think is actually really cool about this legendary is that it actually burns your target, as you can see here. So we'll go ahead and get into this training dummy, cast Shadow Flame. You can see immediately it's starting to damage my target, and it's like catching it on fire, which is kind of neat. It's not like a high quality fire or anything. It's just kind of a nice little touch. It doesn't do a ton of damage, and again, I'm kind of on this kind of baseline level 60 gear, so I don't have a whole lot of haste or anything else that would affect this. When I was testing earlier in these logs, I was like, at my current levels, the extra damage component is worth about an extra Mind Blast, give or take 100 damage. So it's not anything super substantial. I mean, you know, Shadowfiend has never done great damage. But this will for sure, I feel like, definitely bring life to some type of Mindbender-y build. Getting to cast this every 36 seconds is a pretty big change. So I don't know, the super large cooldown reduction is pretty neat. And another thing to note here is that with this reduction as a 1.8 minute cooldown with Shadowfiend, this now perfectly, well, almost near perfectly lines up with Power Infusion. So Power Infusion is a 2-minute cooldown. Typically, Shadowfiend is a 3-minute, so you always have this kind of desyncing of your cooldowns where you might say, hold off on a Power Infusion to use on the next Shadowfiend or vice versa. But with this legendary, you don't necessarily have to do that because now they're much more closer together than they were before. So you only have to wait a few seconds before they're synced, which is nice. So it's interesting. It's not super interactive in that way. It's just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna use my cooldown sooner. The extra damage is, it's fine, it's there, but it doesn't super change your gameplay. It's just you're going to hit Shadowfiend or Mindbender a bit more. So, you know, time will tell if there's a Mindbender build here. We have no idea. Numbers will always change, so keep that in mind. Okay, guys, so the next legendary we're going to look at is on my robes here. So Shadow Word Death consumes 6 seconds of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch on your target, instantly dealing that damage to the target and generating 10 Insanity. So, kind of an interesting legendary. This is partially... this was also an idea of a Torghast power that we have, an Anima power we have inside of Torghast that they're kind of reused here. So just to kind of iterate this real quick, so we have the legendary on, so we'll go ahead and throw our dots up on the target. Boom, cast Shadow Word Death. You can see there were 2 extra damage components here. And if I show in this combat log here, we'll go ahead and unlock this window. So you can see we had the initial Shadow Word Death hit, and then we had 2 additional, it's called Painbreaker Psalm, which is the name of the legendary effect. We had 1 hit for each of our dots here, so 700 damage and then 500 damage. And then we also, since the target didn't die, so target dummy, we did still take the pushback effect. But a neat part of this, I guess neat, you know, the damage pushback is never great. The extra damage that Shadow Word Death is giving, since it's attributed to this extra spell, there's 2 extra spells, 1 for each dot, that extra damage actually is not included in that pushback effect. So even though my Shadow Word Death technically hit for more than this base 1791, that's still all that I got hit for. It wasn't actually reflected in that extra damage, which is neat to see. I am still getting hit, which of course, you know, it still hit me for 2,000, and that was a non-crit. So we still have the problem that I brought up before of, like, you know, the actual damaging component of Shadow Word Death on you can get pretty nasty. Let's see if we can get kind of lucky here. Sometimes, if I get a crit, I need more crit. But it does affect your critical strike damage, right? So, you know, your Shadow Word Death will still scale with that, but your dots, of course, will stay the same on this legendary effect. So you're not actually ever getting the crit part of your dots, right? Because it's just snapshotting whatever that damage is of that dot and giving you that for whatever duration that is. And just another note about this legendary, it does also give Shadow Word Death Insanity when you cast it. Although on alpha this is hard to see because Shadow Word Death is still giving Insanity baseline, even though the tooltip doesn't say that. It's still kind of buggy, you know, alpha beta funness. So it is actually giving me way more Insanity than it should otherwise, which is, you know, fine, I guess. But this does add some Insanity component baseline, or not quote-unquote baseline, to Shadow Word Death. I wish it was in the effect to begin with. It kind of feels bad that we needed a legendary to kind of fully flesh out what Shadow Word Death should be doing, but, you know, there we go. That's what we have. Okay, and just another kind of weird little effect of this legendary, just to keep in mind, it is consuming your dot, right? So it is lowering how much time is left on the dot, so it's just making that damage more instant than it would be otherwise, right? So part of this is, right, if you have a a dot that has less than 6 seconds, which is how much it's consuming, that dot actually does get removed from the target, right? So if we go ahead and put our dots up here, wait for these guys to tick down, and note, with some haste values, it is kind of challenging to keep up dots even on single target with Void Bolt, so this is kind of a reality. So Shadow Word Pain's ticking down here, great, it now has less than 6 seconds. I used Death, it's fully removed the dot. Vampiric Touch got removed 6 seconds as well. So it is kind of just a note that your dots might fall off because of this. However, even though my dots didn't have the full duration remaining, it wasn't the full 6 seconds, it still does full damage as if it did have 6 seconds. So the actual damaging component of the Legendary will stay the same regardless, as long as the dots are up in general. I don't really know if this is intended. This kind of feels like a bug. If my Shadow Word Paint only has 4 seconds left, it should only consume 4 seconds of ticks left, I would assume is how it works. But right now it's just giving you, extra free damage, even though you haven't put it out on the target yet. So again, kind of an interesting interaction. It's there, it's cool, but it's again, not super exciting to use, but is what it is. Okay, and the last Legendary to look at, but definitely not the least by any means, definitely my favorite of the ones we have right now. Not a very exciting effect in terms of like gameplay interactions or stuff like that, but we are getting the Void Tendril effect back as a Legendary effect. If you played back in Legion, this was an artifact trait that we had access to, where our Mind Flays have a chance to spawn a Void Tendril. You'd probably recognize this if you played BFA with the Twisting Appendage Corruption effect. Same kind of model, same thing. And our Mind Flays, you can see, have a chance to spawn these Void Tendrils that also Mind Flay our targets and then give us Insanity back when they do, which is pretty sweet. The proc rate feels pretty similar to what it was in Legion. I don't get them all the time. You can get multiples, so if I just sit here and Mind Flay forever, I might eventually get several to spawn at once. I've had up to 3 that I've seen. They only last for, I believe, 10 seconds. Yep, 10 seconds, so, it's some insanity. It's there. It's cool. As far as the Legendary effects we go, not all of them are nearly as cool as this one. Seeing the tentacles back, I think is awesome. I just wish this was back. Baseline of this back kind of stinks that I need a Legendary to get this back, but I'm happy it's in the game again. That's cool. You can see just kind of sitting here, I'm not getting a whole lot of luck here, getting multiple procs. It does happen though. And just kind of like another weird note here, this Legendary doesn't have any interaction with Mind Seer, right? So if I'm on a 3-target fight and I'm Mind Searing, Void Tendrils aren't going to spawn, right? You have to be actually Mind Flaying to see this happen. So that kind of stinks that I'm taking a Legendary that, is very single target based. So if I'm doing a dungeon or whatever, and I decide I want to Mind Seer, not having that interaction kind of stinks. It wasn't really as big of a deal in Legion because it was just a baseline ability, so the fact that it's only a single target is fine, but is what it is. So kind of stinks that it's not AoE, but it is still cool to see the Void Tendrils back in action. Definitely something I've really missed playing in BFA so far, but is what it is. Okay, guys, and the last Legendary that we currently have access to as a Priest Legendary now. The other ones are somewhat usable for the other specs. This one is also a generic spec one. We have a Leap of Faith Legendary. So, again, if you didn't know, you can only have one Legendary equipped. So if you decide to use this Leap of Faith Legendary, you can't equip a damaging one. But this gives Leap of Faith a second charge and then causes you to instead leap to your target rather than gripping them towards you. So kind of a reverse Leap of Faith, basically. This effect does have a reasonably long range, so you can kind of jump yourself to a target. So it is definitely longer than the ones that, say, Druids have access to, for example, with their Feral Charge. It's a thing. I don't know. I don't really know how useful this would be. Maybe in certain PvP scenarios, I'm not really sure. The PvE use cases are kind of weird because... And, I think in general they're weird just because you're effectively sacrificing damage by using this Legendary because, it's utility and not damage, and you could have been using a damage Legendary. But, there it is. It's an effect. Okay, so now that we've gone over all of the current options available to Shadow Priest specifically inside of the Shadowlands Alpha, I do want to make a quick note here that because these Legendaries are kind of locked in as we're only going to be able to wear one, at least for the time being, there is kind of an unfortunate consequence of, this is the Legendary that I'm using, which means like if I want something that gives me like single target throughput, I can't have that and a utility legendary. There does seem to be kind of a healthy mix of those. Like right now we have the Leap of Faith legendary. Other classes and specs have a few more utility options. I imagine we'll probably get another one soon. So the fact that we can't wear multiples of these, I think makes somewhat sense when if they were all damaging. But because they're kind of mixed in utility and damage, it's kind of it's a weird trade-off that I don't know if I really like having to make do I want extra utility or do I want to do more damage? Because 9 times out of 10 on a PvE player, I'm probably going to pick the more damage because it'll, kill my targets faster. That way you have to deal with the mechanics less that I might be dealing with. So yeah, that's kind of a feels bad part about this right now. I wish that there was a utility legendary slot that was unique equipped and then a damage legendary slot that was unique equipped. That way we could have kind of mix some utility into our spec that we want. Like, hey, maybe I want that reverse life grip for this Mythic Plus dungeon, but maybe in raids I'd like to get this other legendary that makes my shackle better or something, right? But still have the damaging component legendary. That way I'm not sacrificing damage for that. I feel like that would make a better choice overall. I wouldn't feel like I'm giving something up to give back to my group. So just a small note. Hope they fix that, but who knows? Okay, so that's all we have right now as far as legendaries go for the Shadow Priest. I can definitely say I'm slightly underwhelmed, especially relative to what other classes and specs have gotten. A lot of these are just they're kind of meh for me. I'm not super excited about really any of them. The Void Tendril one, I say, is the kind of one exception. It looks fantastic. I love to have the tentacles back. Although its viability is going to be the big problem here. I don't really know if it makes sense to use that legendary, especially considering it's only single target focused and there's so much multi-target and cleave and AoE that happens these days that I'm not sure how useful that'll be. So I kind of wanted to take a bit of time here and just go over some things that I would like to see and that others in the community have brought forward as things they'd like to see as legendaries. I kind of poked around the Discord just asking what people would like to see back. There's a lot of good ideas, which some of them I really, really like as well. I don't have showcase videos for a lot of these, but I'll kind of talk through them and put up some tooltips. Back in Legion, we had a lot of different things I think were really exciting. Some of them that people really, really liked was the Nighthold 4-piece. If you remember this, it was basically kind of deemed the Void Bolt machine gun. It was for some period of time as you enter Void form, Void Bolt does not have a cooldown, which effectively meant you'd enter Void form and then just, turret out a ton of Void Bolts, which is super fun. Again, nothing crazy, AoE or anything, but man, it was fun to play with. It just felt super impactful entering Void form. I thought it was really fun. So would love to see that return as a legendary or even replace some of the ones that we currently have. Another one that's kind of been tossed around is an idea that was actually put into the game in Legion but removed before the game actually launched. Back in Legion Beta, there was an iteration of the Sphere of Insanity spell, which ended up being an artifact trait that got reworked a little bit. But the idea, I think, was really cool and was just never really explored or didn't work at the time. But what it did was, after you entered Void form, you created a Sphere of Insanity for 10, 15 seconds or something. And then basically, it replicated some percentage of all shadow damage that you dealt on targets affected by Shadow Word Pain. So, for example, the sphere would basically replicate the damage that I'm doing across multiple targets as long as they have pain active. Kind of letting you tunnel on a target but still cleave at the same time or have that kind of splash damage across several targets, even if they're not close to each other, which is pretty cool. They just had to be within range of the Sphere of Insanity effect. So I think playing around with something, I think that would be awesome. This is a super cool effect and would give you another option in an AoE situation other than just, put your dots up and cast Mindseer. So I think having this interaction would be pretty sweet. So would love to see this come back. As well, a lot of people kind of mentioned that there were some other legendaries that we liked back in Legion getting back as well. So the legendary wrists were tossed around a few times. This was where your dots stacked up, increasing the damage of your next Void Bolt for kind of consistent damage on single target. And then in AoE, this really ramped up and scaled up your Void Bolt to really be super meaty and chunky. Again, nothing cool or interactive here, but I think just having that consistent damage would be neat. And then a lot of people actually got super excited about utility legendaries, myself included. I think, they've added one here with Leap of Faith. If they could take it even further and even make it, say Leap of Faith kind of transforms into like a Void Grip type situation where it either is a single Death Grip-esque ability that, say, maybe pulls the target towards you with like a Tentacle or something like that. I know Tentacle Grip sounds kind of interesting. That would be really sweet to see in the game. as well as other people mentioned improving a shackle. So right now in the game, we do have shackle undead, which isn't, I guess, super useful these days. In Mythic Plus dungeons especially, you see a lot of uses of things like freeze trap or polymorph or sap or imprison, or, you know, I'm sure I'm missing a ton of others to skip past mobs in dungeons. It would be cool if there was a utility legendary that we could use that would bump up our shackle to be able to be used on other targets, whether it, you know, constricts them with tentacles or void energy, whatever it is. I think adding that thing would be pretty sweet. And then something else that was brought up, there was an artifact trait, or not artifact, excuse me, an Azurite trait that we have in BFA called Thought Harvester that increases, it's basically a Mind Seer proc that hits everything. Mind Seer hits with more damage if they have a dot on them. I think experimenting with that would be cool. I don't really know what would fit here, just know that I would love a legendary effect added into the game that does have some AoE component, whether it's something like Thought Harvester or something else. I think giving us that option would be pretty sweet. And it's definitely something we'd need given the gamut of effects that we currently have available. So we'll see what they add. So yeah, lots of good ideas. I'm sure there are a ton of else out there. If you have your own ideas, throw them in the comments below, put them on the forums. Like, let's make sure Blizzard has all this feedback. They give us some ideas out there, and we'll see what new legendaries come with us in future builds. All right, guys, and that is the overview of the legendaries that we currently have access to. I will definitely be making another video, I guess, in the near future about legendaries once we get some changes and stuff like that. Be sure to check out the links in the description below to have a kind of compilation of what the current effects are. This will be updated over time, and then look for new videos coming soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.